Welcome to the last stealth build you'll ever need in Payday 2. With Payday 2 coming to a close, I wanted to make one last update to one of my older builds and give it some closure as we move on to Payday 3. Unlike a lot of other Payday 2 builds, they can really be based on preference and playstyle, but for stealth, there's just a small set of mechanics and skills that you want to focus on, and in general, you can have a fairly utilitarian build that covers almost every stealthable heist in the game. Of course, there are always exceptions, but I can personally say that I use this build for like 99% of my stealth, and I have never felt like I needed to change my setup. At most, maybe I'll change my equipment or the weapons, but not really the skills. So, let's dive right into it. Let's start with the skills. There's a lot to go over, so I thought I'd do it one tree at a time and try to give you reasons as for why I pick certain skills up and how they can be useful for you in stealth. In Mastermind, there's only a couple things that we need. Under the controller subtree, I picked the Forced Friendship Basic. The extra cable ties can be pretty handy. Confident Basic, usefulness debatable. And mainly, we're here to pick up Stockholm Syndrome Basic. For this subtree, we're mainly covering our bases for hostages, and the few heists we have where you need to deal with controlling large amounts of hostages. Examples off the top of my head include Bank Heist, 4 Stores, Go Bank. Basically, only really the early ones. Overkill probably thought it was too hard to balance, so they stopped designing heists in this way. Regardless, Stockholm Syndrome isn't really essential, but it definitely makes some missions much easier if you know what you're doing. Basically, the method of use here is take out the guards that are roaming around the map, there's usually only 4, destroy the cameras, or if there are Titan cameras, take out the guy watching the cameras, and then you can shoot in the air and waltz around uncontested, so long as you keep shooting in the air. This also works if you're using the saw, either with the loud motor and sawing in the air, or using the saw against, say, deposit boxes or doors. Shooting and sawing both count as noise, and get civilians to drop down to the ground. But really, I think the only thing I'd say is necessary from this subtree is the extra cable ties from Forced Friendship, because you never know when you need them, and they only cost 1 skill point. Still, it's good to have Stockholm Syndrome for when you need it. Just like in Mastermind, Enforcer doesn't really have a whole lot of skills that we picked up. Under Tank, I have picked up Resilience Basic and Transporter Basic, really just to get Transporter Basic. Being able to throw bags 50% further is extremely helpful if you're trying to reach a helicopter or a boat. It just gives you the peace of mind that you're actually going to reach wherever you're trying to throw. Now under Technician, this is where we start getting into the meat of the skills. Under Engineer, I have Third Law and Jack of All Trades, both aced. Now what you really want here is the ace part of Jack of All Trades. This gives you a second deployable to bring for your stealth heists. It's very straightforward. I don't think I need to show you gameplay here. Your equipment is extremely useful for stealth, and being able to combine, say, ECMs with the body bag case, it gives you so much more breathing room for hiding bodies and the like. Or say in the rare scenario where you have to bring a saw, like for Go Bank, you can bring ECMs and an ammo bag. ECMs to complete the stealth portion, and a saw to open, well, not the saw, ammo, in case your saw runs out while you're opening deposit boxes. Next, let's go over the rest of the Technician tree. Under the Breacher subtree, we have Hardware Expert, Drill Sergeant, Kickstarter, and more firepower, all aced. Hardware Expert, Drill Sergeant, and Kickstarter, these are all to improve your drilling by reducing the time it takes, making it silent, and giving you ways to fix drills faster. There's actually a small argument to make for not picking up the skill to make your drill silent in case you want to use it as a way to lure guards, but so very few heists actually make use of this mechanic that I think it's better just to keep the silent drilling. Now, more firepower is a very useful skill. All more firepower does is give you the max amount of C4 that you can carry. And why on earth would I want to use C4? Well, C4 can be used as spotting mines in stealth. This can be extremely useful on maps where you don't have a lot of visibility, or you play solo and you don't have the help of teammates to spot guards or use cameras to spot stuff. Strategically placing C4 enables one to move around the map with confidence when, say, turning corners. You know your mine is already there and watching. C4 sensor mines pull double duty by beeping to let you know when a guard passes by it, and it also spots guards. I even believe that it takes the skills from the ghost tree, where spotted guards stay highlighted longer. I think anyway, I didn't test this one myself. But either way, C4 is a very useful tool, and I bring it almost as often as I bring, say, body bag cases. Just depends on the heist. Continuing on, I forgot to mention that I have 1 point in the Oppressor subtree of Technician for steady grip, because I had 1 point and nowhere else to put it. Admittedly, better accuracy is good because in stealth you don't want to shoot and accidentally hit glass or something else behind your target. Now before we get to Ghost, just going to show you the Fugitive tree. Yeah, nothing selected here because nothing is really useful for stealth. Well, there is a small argument to be made to get melee damage skills under Pumping Iron if you're the type that likes to melee a lot, but realistically, it's not very helpful. And finally, we have the Ghost tree. Let's start with the Artful Dodger subtree. So we have Duck and Cover, Inner Pockets, and Parkour, all basic. Duck and Cover and Parkour, these are for increased movement speed. Of course, very handy for stealth because the faster you can move around the map means the less you'll get detected by guards and cameras. Inner Pockets, arguably unnecessary if you mod your weapons correctly, but at the same time, there's not a lot of places you can spend only 2 skill points. If I were to reshift skills, I'd pick up the skill that unlocks the Saw in the Enforcer tree. But at the same time, if I were using the Saw, I'd still want Inner Pockets because your concealment with the Saw is pretty poor, so bad example there. Well, anyway, they're all pretty useful, and Inner Pockets is good for people that are starting out and they don't have a lot of mods so they can't make max concealment guns. Now, let's move on to Shinobi, and that's pretty easy. Everything aced. So for the Shinobi subtree, we'll have to break this down 1 skill at a time. Starting with Chameleon, this reduces your detection while in casing mode and gives you the ability to spot, which is very helpful in situations where you play with friends and they mask up while you stay in casing mode, making it easier to stay hidden but still available to help check the area before your masked friend does. This excels in stuff like Golden Grin Casino, where the entire heist is basically accessible to people without having to mask up. The Ace version gives you the ability to pick up items while in casing mode. Unfortunately, this is pretty useless outside of very, very specific missions like Big Bank, because very few maps were designed in a way where you can walk around the map in casing mode, and there just so happens to be key cards or something like that that you can find and pick up. Next, let's go over Cleaner. Now, this is a very straightforward skill. You get extra body bags, and the Ace version, you get the ability to bring the body bag case deployable. Essential for trigger-happy heisters that kill lots of civs, which admittedly is often the easiest way to stealth, so actually it's a very viable strategy. After that, we have Sixth Sense. Now, this skill is pretty amazing. You gain the ability to spot everything within a certain radius of you when you stand completely still. It works when masked up or in casing mode, and it's pretty useful in a lot of different scenarios. Like when you have to pick the lock on a door and you start spotting stuff inside before you're done. Now you'll know if there's a surprise guard walking by, or something like that. It's also super handy to have because you can just sit in cover, like under some stairs, and then start highlighting all the possible guards around you, and you'll know whether or not it's safe to leave your spot. The Ace version lets you buy insider assets. Now for many heists, this is essential for having an easier time in stealth because some of those assets you can just straight up buy key cards, access to an objective, or something along those lines. So both the basic and Ace version are must-haves for stealth. Next up is Nimble, also a very useful skill to have. The basic version allows you to hack one camera and disable it for 25 seconds. You can also re-disable it before the timer is up. This skill is essential for certain cameras that basically only have one job. And that job is maybe to watch one important door or one important hallway, and there's no other easy way in. So your option is either to use up an ECM, or use your free hack ability and give you the freedom to pick the lock or traverse that hallway without being detected. It's also great for helping your teammates get past a camera when, say, they're carrying some heavy loot and they're too slow to get by undetected. You can also use it to disable a camera in a strategic area. So you disable it first, then kill a guard, take his pager, and leave without being detected. In this particular situation, even an ECM isn't useful because you'll likely have the pager blocking skill, so hacking cameras is by far the best strategy. The aced version of Nimble isn't that exciting. You get to pick locks faster, which, is good. And you also have the ability to lockpick safes. And while that sounds fun, again, it's not very useful, simply because Overkill realized that they couldn't balance around this, so very few heists actually have regular safes that can be picked. Still, it does have its uses. After Nimble, we have ECM Overdrive. The basic version of this skill just increases ECM duration. Very simple, very straightforward, and it becomes essential for people looking to do some ECM cheesing. But even if you're not, longer ECMs will help you stay undetected longer from cameras, or they'll block pagers longer, which, can actually be a detriment, but overall, in most cases, you'll want the longer duration. The ace version of the skill allows ECMs to open certain security doors. Most commonly, this is used to open security doors to the camera room. However, this is another skill that eventually got balanced just by making heists not have these doors that can be opened with ECMs. But on the plus side, this particular mechanic did survive longer than others, and sometimes it even shows up in the modern heists, so it does have more useful scenarios than some of the other skills that I mentioned previously. And at the very top of the skill tree, we have ECM Specialist. Basic allows you to use 2 ECM jammers. Very fun, very self-explanatory. The Ace version also gives you more ECM duration, and it also gives you the ability to block pagers. So this part of the skill, it can be good or bad depending on how you look at it. As mentioned previously, it's essential for ECM cheesing, and that is, you're absolutely fucked in a stealth heist, and the only thing keeping the stealth portion of your run going is that ECM jammer. If that's the scenario, you want the duration, you want the pager blocking, and you want everybody to be using their ECMs without overlapping them. This is useful for the times when you're close to completing an objective or completing the entire heist, and you just need that extra push to get to the end. On the other hand, it can screw you over sometimes. An example being, let's say you dropped an ECM prematurely to block a pager, and then a guard spots you and you have to kill him. Now, you have to wait for that ECM jammer duration to end before you can pick up the pager. This can actually screw you over because it gives time for another guard to walk over and spot the dead body. It also means that you have to figure out how to stop that camera from seeing the body, which, if you can reach the camera, then you can hack it. But what if it's too far away? You might not be able to. Really, its usefulness fluctuates on a case-by-case basis, but in general, you'd still rather have it than not. On an additional note, the pager blocking skill also extends to those using the hacker Perk Deck. That was a text. So those rechargeable ECMs, they will also block pagers when you have this skill. And finally, we have the Silent Killer subtree of Ghost. For this, we have Second Wind and the Professional Basic, while Optical Illusions and High Value Target are aced. Now, Second Wind and the Professional, they're kind of useless, they're just filler points. Optical Illusions is also arguably unnecessary. Again, if you're able to get all the concealment you need from weapon modding, you don't need this skill. But having both Optical Illusions and Inner Pockets gives you more leeway for some weapon choices, and in some scenarios, can help you for awkward setups. Like, for example, when using a saw, now you can equip a 33 concealment group recurs instead of just the max 30, giving you the lowest possible detection for a setup with otherwise pretty high visibility. But the main draw of this subtree is High Value Target aced. While the description doesn't say anything about stealth, it absolutely works in stealth, both the ADS marking and the increased duration. Normally, you have to spot enemies with your interaction key, but with High Value Target, you don't need to do that. You can simply aim down sights and quickly scan a room, and it'll mark everything within your line of view. I would say though that sometimes it's a little bit unreliable. Sometimes it won't mark if you go too fast or if there's some slight obstructions, but overall, it's a very handy skill. It's great for the few scenarios where there's dozens of civilians and you're trying to spot the guard that's hidden among them. Instead of wasting your time scanning the crowd and trying to spot and mash your interaction key, you can just ADS and spin around. It's also very handy in the other rare scenario where you want to spot guards that are outside of your range. So spotting through interacting actually has a limited range, but spotting from ADSing doesn't seem to have that limitation. So say you have someone on the overlook at Murky Station. You can spot all the guards up there with your gun from a mile away, and you can still help your buddies down below who are stealthing in close proximity. Still, it's a nice feature, but I wouldn't say it's super necessary to have. Really, the biggest benefit to me is the passive boost to spot duration, which highlights the guards for longer. I think I also mentioned this previously, but I think this applies even to people spotted by the C4 trip mines. Alright, so we covered all the skills, but before we go on, I did want to share one small change if you wanted the ability to unlock the saw. I keep mentioning it. Like I said, it's not super common to want or need one, but there are some missions like a solo stealth go bank or a solo stealth transport train heist where having a saw makes life so much easier. So what you can do is, I mentioned that but the professional is pretty useless. Let's get rid of that. Also get rid of this steady grip and then put it right there. There you go. Now you have the ability to use the saw. Now, I know there are more skills that you can have for the saw, but I think just unlocking these is good enough, since you still have Jack of all trades, and you can even bring an ammo bag if you're worried about running out of saw ammo. Specifically for the transport train heist, when you do it solo, you have a very limited amount of keycards and ECM to use for opening train car doors. One of the main mechanics of that particular heist is you have to find the keycards that civilians have, but that's not very easy. So one viable alternative is to just use a saw. A saw modded with the silent motor is all you really need, but you do have to be careful because this doesn't make it completely silent. It only reduces the range at which it can be heard. Fortunately, there's another skill we have that works perfectly to see whether anyone is within the detection radius of the saw. 6 Sense. Yep, the range of 6 Sense is just about the range that enemies can hear the saw being used. So if you stand still for a while and notice that nobody around is being highlighted, that means it's pretty safe to use the saw. For the perk deck, well, this is probably the one area of the build where there isn't a clear winner for what you want in a stealth build. But basically, it can be narrowed down to 2 perk decks: Burglar and Copycat. Burglar is the de facto perk deck for stealth. It increases your, well, dodge we don't care about, but your body bagging speed by 20%. You pick locks 20% faster. You answer pagers 10% faster. And you also gain 10% movement speed while crouched. I believe this is pretty straightforward. These bonuses are all very helpful aspects to any stealther's repertoire. However, most of these bonuses are really just a passive bonus, and they won't really make or break any runs. One can even argue, and this is an argument that I support, is that most of these bonuses are just boosts to your interaction speed for various activities, and if you use Team AI customization and give them the interaction speed skill, it makes these boosts much less impactful. I have an entire video where I show off the AI interaction speed buff, so check that out if you're interested. That being said, these bonuses are still very helpful when you're playing in situations where you don't have AI on your team, like a full party with friends or in public lobbies, so there still very much is a place for the Burglar perk deck. In my opinion though, one of the most impactful parts of the perk deck is definitely the faster pager answer speed. Now this is something that is unique to Burglar alone, and can sometimes really save a run. Say if you kill 2 guards in quick succession, and now you have to answer 2 pagers all by yourself. Without Burglar, you're cutting it very, very close. But with Burglar, it saves you at least a second in answering that first pager, giving you much more time to reach the second before the alarm goes off. On the other hand, you have Copycat. and more specifically, the copycat versions of Yakuza and Hacker. First, let's go over what Copycat offers. On its own, it lets you cycle in between buffs, but for stealth, what you really want is to stack the movement speed skill. So with just Copycat, you're gaining an increase of 10% crouched and carry movement speed, multiplied by 4. Now that's actually a considerable amount of speed gain for just crouching and bag movement, both integral parts of stealth. Now let's take a look at the perks that you can copy, starting with Copycat Yakuza. Copycat Yakuza's bonus is an increased movement speed of 20% when at low health. Stack that on top of the speed bonuses from Copycat, and you have the fastest speedrunning stealth perk deck there is. Let's do a quick comparison, shall we? So here is a side-by-side comparison between no perk deck, using the Yakuza perk deck, and using the Copycat Yakuza perk deck. And I gotta say, I was pretty blown away when I finally saw these perk decks side by side. I mean, I always knew there was a speed difference, but now you can really see the differences between them. Having that much speed gives you less time to be spotted by guards and cameras, and you can just get around the map incredibly fast while avoiding detection. However, at the end of the day, Copycat Yakuza is very much a speedrunner's perk deck. It's generally only for those that are already pretty experienced in stealth, because it doesn't really offer you any extra help other than movement speed. Granted, movement speed is arguably one of the most important things for stealth, but being the only benefit it has makes it kind of hard to justify using, unless you simply don't need the other skills or perks. On the other hand, if you prefer a perk deck that comes with a get-out-of-jail-free card, there's Copycat Hacker. Hacker is a perk deck that doesn't really have any stealth bonuses, it's mostly a loud perk deck. But the nature of having pocket ECMs is already quite a boon to any stealther's inventory. It's basically just a rechargeable and instant use ECM that you can use to disable cameras, block pagers, and you can save your real ECM equipment for other uses, such as opening security doors, that you can anyway, or extending the ECM duration when all hell breaks loose. One of the biggest draws of the Hacker Pocket ECMs is their instant activation. As soon as you push the button, the ECM goes into effect, so you don't have to wait for a delay to drop it like you do a regular ECM. This means it's the perfect skill to use when, say, you accidentally kill a civilian in front of a camera, or you get caught by a guard who happens to be watched by a camera. You can activate a pocket ECM and then use a body bag before the camera sees the body, or in the case of the guard, you can kill the guard without the camera instantly ruining your stealth. You can also activate pocket ECMs at any time, like if you're picking the lock on a door and you start getting spotted by a camera, you can activate the pocket ECM without having to let go of picking the lock. This saves you a lot of time and hassle. Now, there's not really much to say here, unlike the other perk decks, because Hacker on its own only has the pocket ECMs as a stealth skill. The rest of it is just a loud-oriented perk deck. So combining Copycat's movement speed and Hacker's pocket ECMs in Copycat Hacker makes it by default the better version of the two. So I did forget to mention, if you wanted to, you could use the Copycat version of Burglar, which gives you the 10% faster pager answering speed. So if for some reason you wanted the extra movement speed from Copycat, but didn't care about the interaction speed bonuses from Burglar, you could opt to choose Copycat Burglar. So in summary, you basically have your choice of regular Burglar or Copycat, either through Copycat Yakuza, Copycat Hacker, or Copycat Burglar. Each has their own ups and downs, so really you can just choose based on your preferences. Personally, I like Copycat Hacker the most because it has the most potential for saving your ass when things go south. And in general, it's still a pretty utilitarian setup. On-demand ECMs are a very strong tool, and they can be used preemptively as well as reactionary. There's really just no wrong choice here. So this part of the build is mostly based on your preferences. There's really only two things you need to consider for your weapon choices. One, can you get concealment high enough and thus get a low overall detection? And 2, can you shoot and propel bodies away from cameras or out of sight? Now, considering these 2 factors, there's only really one no-brainer option for stealth: the Judge. One of my longtime favorite guns, it's a really effective stealth weapon, regardless of what heist you play or even what DLC you own. Why? Well, let's see. 1, it has high damage to kill alerted enemies that have a lot of health on high difficulties. 2, it has high concealment, so all you really need is to put a silencer on and you're golden. It's fairly hassle-free for modding. 3, being a shotgun, it has that ability to shoot bodies and blast them away from line of sight in front of cameras or other guards. And 4, it's a free community weapon. You don't need any paid DLC for it, and if I remember correctly, you even unlock it pretty early. I think at like level 35 or something. It's simply the easiest choice for a stealth weapon because it has everything you might possibly need all in one package. As for your primary weapon, well, I would say it doesn't really matter so much, so just go with what your heart desires. But if you did need me to give you a choice, I would go with something long range like the Cavity 9mm. It has good concealment, high damage, and pretty decent accuracy at range, if you need it for that. However, it is a DLC weapon, so people might not have the option to use it. Another good option is, well, good options are any high concealment shotgun in case you don't want to use the Judge. There are plenty of assault rifles that you can get with high concealment. If you want to, you can even also use akimbo weapons. Most of them are DLC free and they can have high concealment as well as equip a silencer. So it doesn't really matter, just as long as you get under 5 detection, you'll be pretty okay. For your throwable, there's not really much to choose from. If you're running Yakuza or Copycat Yakuza, actually, you should be running Copycat Yakuza, not regular Yakuza, you'll want a self-damage grenade to lower your health. The best one being the Molotov. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. You're pretty unlikely to use your throwable because shooting a silence gun is just way easier, and in the case of a shotgun, just has way more utility. So bring something that doesn't go boom, and at least you won't fuck over stealth if you fat finger your buttons. For your melee, as long as it has 30 base concealment, you can use whatever you like. Ideally, a high damage and fast weapon is the best, so I think some fairly meta options are the Ice Pick and Kento's Tanto. Yeah. They both have high base damage without charging, and they still have max concealment, 32 if you have inner pockets. You can also bring the tactical flashlight because, well, it doubles as a flashlight if for some reason you didn't want to put one on your gun. Personally, I just use the money bundle. Why? It makes a funny sound when you hit things. And finally, I think that's it. That's the whole build. So I'm actually recording this after editing. I realized I changed the format of the video from what I used to do, and I didn't have a nice showcase of just the whole build so you could see it all at once. So I'll do that now. All the skills, the perk deck, and also my weapons and how I've modded them. Since I'm recording this after the fact, I also didn't plan what to say here, so I guess this means I can ramble a bit. I already kind of regret making this video. In retrospect, I think I spent a lot of effort making something that I don't think a lot of people are really going to care about right now. Still, I feel like I had some sense of obligation for this one in particular. Even if that means forcing myself to play the game, which I haven't enjoyed for a very long time now. Well, I do hope that it is helpful for the few people that need it. And for me, it feels like a metaphorical bookend that I can finally close. Well, one of them, anyway. I got a million others that are still open, but that's just how it be. You know, as you get older, it seems like one of the things my friend says a lot starts becoming a lot more pertinent to our lives. You gotta have a bad time to have a good time. And I think I've used up enough time. So, yeah. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope to see you again soon.